Hey everyone, welcome back to the Parenting Lab. All right, so a couple of weeks ago, I had a booth at a local market, just an outdoor vendor market for the Parenting Lab. It was a family event, so I was looking forward to spending the day talking with parents and sharing resources, just getting my name out there in my community. I've done several of these events now, and I've started to notice some patterns that kind of pop up that I think are kind of interesting. So here's what I see happening. A lot of parents slow down when they walk by. They look at my signs, they glance at the podcast information. Sometimes they'll smile or wave, or most of the time they just keep moving. Then there's another group that stops and asks quick questions. You're a parenting expert. Awesome. How do I deal with potty training? Or how do I get my kids to listen? What do I do about my three-nager? Then there's another group of parents. These are the ones that have older kids, teenagers, young adults, even grown kids who say things like, "Oh, I wish you'd been around 20 years ago," or "It's too late for me now," or "Oh, too bad the damage is already done." And then there's another group, and this is the group that fascinates me. They don't stop to talk. They wait until I'm busy helping someone else or if I step away, and then they'll grab a flyer when they think that I won't notice or when they know I won't engage with them. Sometimes they'll take a picture of the booth with the QR code as they walk by, almost as if they're gathering information without wanting to be seen gathering information. And the more I do this work, whether it's at an event like this one or just talking with people that I know, the more I realize there is still such a stigma around getting help with parenting. For some reason, many of us have absorbed this idea that asking for support means we're failing somehow. That if we need guidance, resources, coaching, therapy, a book, a podcast, a conversation, it somehow means that we're not doing a good enough job. But I have never believed that. Most of the conversations I have at events like this one eventually lead to me explaining that I don't really help with kids. I help with parenting. And even more specifically, I help parents close the gap between the relationships they want to have with their children and the way they're actually showing up inside those relationships. Because that gap is rarely about the child's behavior. Potty training, tantrums, back talking, pushing boundaries, none of those things are the cause of your reactions and how you're showing up and how much fulfillment you have in your role as a parent. More often, those things are gauged by our stress, by attachment, nervous systems. It's about old patterns that we inherited without really realizing it. It's about wounds we haven't fully healed and beliefs that we have and stories we tell ourselves that we never really stop to question. Our parenting and our enjoyment of it comes from a place much, much deeper and older than our child's behavior. A lot of us are just parenting on autopilot, and that often leaves us in one of three places. Sometimes we're moving through the days and even years without thinking much at all about why we do what we do. Sometimes we assume the challenges that we're having are primarily because of our child's behavior. Like somehow, if they would just do everything the way they're supposed to, we wouldn't have to be like we are. We wouldn't have to yell or punish or pull the leash so hard. And sometimes we've convinced ourselves that this is just the way things are, the way we are, that our family dynamics are fixed and that there's not much we can do to change them. But I want to offer you a fourth possibility that breaks us out of this autopilot. What if, instead of just accepting things as they are or doing things the way we've always done them, we become parents who are willing to get curious? What if we were willing to honestly look at where things are right now, how things are actually going? Parents who are willing to learn what needs to be learned and heal what needs to be healed and practice what needs to be practiced. Parents who are willing to interrupt patterns that no longer serve them and then intentionally create new ones that do. That is what today's episode is about. It's a parenting self assessment. The word assessment makes it sound scary, but I promise it's not. It's not about finding everything that's wrong or making you feel guilty or feel overwhelmed. It's simply an inventory. I want you to look honestly at what's working, what's not working, and the places where your relationships are strong and where they might need more attention, support, or growth. Because awareness is the first step in the healing process. You cannot improve what you cannot see. So today I'm going to walk you through a parenting assessment. So you can pause and reflect as we go, or you can download the worksheet and spend some time with the questions later. Either way, my hope is that by the end of this episode, you'll have a little bit more clarity about where you are, where you want to go, and what the next step towards that might be. So I want to start somewhere that many parents struggle to begin. I want to start with what's working. Because if you're like most of the parents I work with, you already know exactly what you wish was different. We're all very aware of the things that feel like they're not working. Most of us are incredibly good at identifying our weaknesses. We can list our mistakes almost instantly. But when someone asks what we're doing well, we hesitate. Not because there aren't strengths, but because we're not used to looking for them. A healthy assessment isn't about finding everything that's wrong, it's about seeing the whole picture. And that means acknowledging first what is going really well. So let's start here. What are the best parts of the relationship you have with your child? What feels strong? What feels meaningful? Where do you feel connected? Then consider this. If I asked your child what you are really good at as a parent, what would they say? Not what you hope they would say, but what would they actually say? Take just a second to think about that. And now I want you to make a list of 5 things that you are doing well as a parent. Be specific. Don't say things like, I love my kids. Guys, of course you do. That's not what we're looking for here. What are the things you actually do that contribute to the relationship you're building? All right. This is not an exercise in ego, it's an exercise in accuracy. Because if we're going to be honest about where we need to grow, we also need to be honest about where we've already grown. So before you move on, ask yourself this question. What progress have you made as a parent that your past self would be proud of? So maybe you've become more patient or more aware or more intentional, or maybe you've released patterns you once thought were permanent and now you're focused on making new ones. Whatever it is that comes to mind, don't rush past it. Growth isn't measured only by how far you still have to go. It's also measured by how far you've already come. And before we look at the places that need attention, it's important to recognize both. All right, so now that you've taken a moment to recognize what's going well, let's take a closer look at the relationship itself. Now, one of the biggest misconceptions in parenting is that if our child is behaving well, our relationship must be healthy, that things must be going well. And those things definitely influence each other, okay, but they aren't the same thing. Kids can be compliant without feeling connected. They can follow rules without feeling safe enough to come to you with the hard things. And they can love you really deeply, but still feel misunderstood by you. The opposite can also be true. They can act out, talk back, even rebel, and still know without a doubt that you're a safe space. And your relationship can still be unshakable, even when their outward behavior is defiant or challenging. So instead of evaluating behavior, I want you to evaluate the relationship. I'm going to offer you 4 areas that I believe form the foundation of a healthy parent child relationship. Okay, security, connection, communication, and fun. For each one, I want you to give yourself a rating from 1 to 5. 1 means this area needs significant attention, and 5 meaning this is a clear strength in our relationship. Not because the number matters, but because it just gives you a starting place. Okay. All right. First, let's talk about security. Does your child experience you as a safe place? Not as a perfect parent, but a safe parent. When they're hurting or scared or embarrassed or overwhelmed, do they know that they can come to you? Do they trust that your love isn't dependent on their performance or on their behavior? So, given that information, give yourself a rating from 1 to 5. And then ask yourself, why did I choose that number? Now, with that number in mind, consider, is that number based on evidence Or is it based on the story I'm telling myself? Now, here's what I mean by that. Evidence is observable. It's what you can actually point to, things that actually happened. Your child comes to you when they're hurt, or they tell you about their day, or they seek you out for comfort. Okay. Maybe they avoid you when they're struggling, or they're hesitant to tell the truth, or conflict pushes you farther apart. Okay. Those are all pieces of evidence, things that actually happen. Stories, on the other hand, are the conclusions that we draw from that evidence, or sometimes in spite of it. All right. So stories sound like I'm a terrible parent, or my kids don't respect me, or I'm doing everything wrong. Right. But they go in the other direction too. You can tell yourself, everything's fine. This is just how kids are. There's nothing I can do. All right. Stories are our interpretations. Evidence is what's actually happening. So try to separate the two. The goal isn't to make yourself look better or worse than you actually are. It's simply to see your parenting and your relationships as clearly as you can. Okay, the next one is connection. How connected do you feel to your child? Do you know what's going on in their world? Do they invite you into it? Are they invited into your world? Do you enjoy spending time together, even if it's just little moments throughout the day? Again, give yourself a rating 1 to 5, and then ask yourself why. And remember, evidence or stories? Okay, then we have communication. How well do the two of you communicate? Can you have difficult conversations without them immediately turning into arguments? Does your child feel heard? Do you feel heard? Rate yourself and then reflect on what's influencing that number. And the last one I want to talk about is fun. Now, this one surprises people, but it's so, so, so important. When was the last time that you and your child just had fun? Just enjoyed being together? Does your relationship have room for laughter and playfulness and unstructured joy? Or has it become mostly about responsibilities and lectures and correction? All right, give yourself a rating. Then, once you've rated all 4 of these areas, I want you to step back and look at the whole picture. Don't judge the numbers, just get curious about them. Which area feels the strongest and which one needs the most attention? Sometimes we expect every category to be a 5, but that's really not how relationships work. Every relationship has seasons. Every family has strengths, and every family has places that could use a little bit more attention. And they definitely ebb and flow over time. The goal isn't a perfect score. The goal here really is clarity. Because once we know where the relationship feels the strongest and where it feels the weakest, you have a much better idea of where to focus your energy. Okay, so now that you've looked at those 4 areas, let's focus on something a little bit different. Not what's wrong, but what's missing. Because growth isn't about being a different parent, it's just about being curious and open. It's about noticing the places where our relationships need that extra bit of attention. Okay, so here are a few questions for you to reflect on. What parts of your relationship with your child do you wish were different? Okay, maybe you wish you laughed together more. Maybe you wish that they talked to you more. Maybe you wish that there were fewer power struggles or less tension. Don't overthink it, just notice what comes to mind. Then, next, when do you feel the most disconnected from your child? Not if you feel disconnected. Ruptures happen all the time. It is unrealistic to expect connection all the time. But when does disconnection tend to happen? Is it during the morning rush? Is it at bedtime? Is it when they're doing their homework or when you're emotional? When they're emotional? When you're stressed? When they're stressed? Okay, patterns matter here. Because if you know when disconnection starts to happen or when it tends to happen, you can start to ask why. And that leads to the next question. What situations bring out the version of yourself that you don't want to be? All right. Maybe you become impatient when you're running late. Maybe you get controlling when things start to feel chaotic, or maybe you shut down during conflict. This isn't about labeling yourself, it's about identifying the conditions that make it harder to show up the way that you want to. And last, I want you to think a little further on down the road. If nothing changed over the next 5 years, what would concern you the most? Hmm. That one's hard for me. That was one of the hardest questions I asked myself on the beginning of my journey in parenting because it created a little bit of fear. in me of what things were going to look like. Now, I don't ask that question to create fear in you. I ask it because it helps to clarify what actually matters. Sometimes we keep telling ourselves this is just a phase or we'll deal with it later. And sometimes that's true. But other times, what we're noticing isn't a phase, it's a pattern. And patterns have a way of becoming the culture of our families if we don't intentionally interrupt them. Now, the good news is that awareness gives us choice. Once we name the pattern and recognize it, we can start to change it, right? And that's exactly why you're doing this assessment. Not to criticize yourself, but to identify where your energy is going to have the biggest impact. So, as you've been answering these questions, I'm hoping that you've noticed something. Very few of them were about your child, they were about you. And that's because while parenting certainly involves our children, our experience of parenting is mostly, largely shaped by us. Our history, our beliefs, our nervous system, expectations, our patterns. Okay, one of the greatest gifts that we can give to our children is our willingness to become aware of those things, not because our parents did everything wrong or that we're doing everything wrong. It's because every family passes something on. Okay. Now, some of those things we want to keep, but other things we want and need to change or let go of. So, I want you to reflect on just a few more questions. What messages did you receive about emotions growing up? Were they welcomed or ignored? Were they punished or fixed as quickly as possible? What patterns from your childhood do you find yourself repeating? Not because you chose them intentionally, but because they're just familiar. And just as importantly, what patterns have you already intentionally changed? Don't overlook those. Every time you respond differently than you were taught, you're changing the direction and path of your family. And that's so significant. And finally, ask yourself, I love this question, where do you feel stuck? Not where do you feel like a failure, but where do you feel stuck? Those are very different questions. Okay. Failure says, this is who I am. But stuck says, this is where I need support. And that is an incredibly important distinction because no one is naturally skilled or good at every part of parenting. None of us were handed a manual for navigating our own triggers and healing wounds and communicating through conflict or regulating emotions while also doing all of those exact same things for someone else. Okay, these are skills and skills can be learned, which brings me to the final part of our assessment. Not just identifying where you are, but deciding where you're going to go and what you're going to do with what you've learned. Now, hopefully, at this point, you've seen the areas where you're confident. Maybe there are a couple of questions that made you pause a little longer than you expected. That's the purpose of an assessment, not the grade itself, but that it gives you direction. So, we're going to finish with a few more questions. First, what are three things that you want to improve or learn more about? Notice I didn't say, what are three things that you're bad at? Okay. I said, what do you want to learn? Because parenting isn't about arriving at some magical destination where we've mastered it all. It's about continuing to grow alongside our children, always. Maybe you want to learn more about emotional regulation. Maybe it's communication or boundaries or attachment or understanding behavior through a brain perspective. I don't know. I don't know what you need to learn, but whatever it is, please write it down. And once you have identified those areas, now ask yourself what resources are available. And I want you to think broad. Who are the people, the books, the podcasts, the communities, the professionals that could support you? Because here's what I've learned after working with parents for all of these years. Most parents don't lack information. In fact, sometimes information is not the problem at all. They have plenty of it. What they lack is support. They've listened to the podcast, they've saved the Instagram posts, they've bought the books, and they know what they should be doing. Okay, the hard part is taking the knowledge from our heads into our hands and actually applying it consistently when life gets busy and when emotions are high and when those old patterns, those default things start to take over. That's where the growth often happens. Not from learning one more strategy or one more quick fix, but from having someone walk alongside you as you practice it. And that's really what coaching is. It's not someone telling you how to parent, it's having someone that's outside help you see what you cannot see on your own. Someone who can ask you different questions and offer a different perspective. Someone who can help you connect the dots between your past and your present. One of the biggest misconceptions I encounter all the time is that asking for help means that you failed. And I've told you at the beginning, I could not disagree with that more. To me, asking for help is a sign that you have decided that your relationships, your family is worth investing in. And it's no different than hiring a personal trainer for your health concerns or hiring a financial planner for your money matters, right? We don't think twice about seeking expertise in those areas. But somehow, we expect ourselves to navigate one of the most demanding roles in our lives completely on our own. Support is not a sign of weakness. Support is access to new skills and new perspective and healing and access to really becoming the parent that you want to be. And that's exactly why I do this work. It's not because I have all the answers. I promise I don't. It's because I've seen what happens when parents stop trying to figure it out alone and start to grow with intention. I want to leave you with one final thought. And that is, if this assessment revealed some areas that need attention, I hope your first response isn't discouragement. I really hope it's hope. That sounds weird. I hope it's hope. I hope it's hope. I want you to be hopeful, okay? Because awareness is just the beginning, it's the place to start. You don't change what you refuse to see, but once you see it, you have a choice. You can continue on autopilot. If that's working for you, please go ahead and continue to do that. Or you can become intentional. All right. And remember, this assessment that I walked you through today isn't something you take just once and never look at it again. Relationships change, children grow, we grow. What feels like a strength today might need more attention a year from now. And that area that feels difficult today might actually become one of your greatest strengths over time. That's why I think it's valuable to come back to these questions every now and then, all right? Not to measure your worth as a parent, but to measure the health of your relationships and the direction that you're headed, just to recalibrate and re-inventory where you're at and what you want. So, if you want a copy of the questions that we went through today, I put together a simple assessment that you can download for free. You can get the link in the show notes, or you can find it on my website at theparentinglab.org under free resources. And as you've worked through these questions, if you found yourself thinking, I know where I'm stuck, I just don't know how to move forward, I would love to help. Okay, that's what coaching is for. It's what I'm here for. I'm here for you always, not because you're broken, but because sometimes the fastest way to create that lasting change is to have someone walk that path with you, someone that can see those blind spots and celebrate your progress, hold you accountable, and give you the practical tools to bridge that gap between the parent that you are and the parent that you want to be. I have so many resources for you. So please reach out, and I would love to point you in the direction that will get you the support that you need. Thank you so much for spending this time with me today. I hope this assessment gave you more than just a list of things to work on. I hope it gave you a clearer picture of what you're doing well, a little bit more compassion for yourself, and a sense of direction for what comes next in your parenting journey. Have an amazing week, and I will see you all next time, where we'll continue to explore the art and science of parenting and put your parenting to the test. Take care, everyone.